The AI revolution ahead will be radically different from what most people expect. But it'll be very similar to revolutions that have come before this. We recently hosted the world's top AI investor, Hemant Mohapatra from Lightspeed, for a conversation. And what he told us about these cycles shocked us.
What is the resource now? It used to be oil droplets and CPU cycles and GPU cycles in the late 90s, early 2000s. And now it is.
That realization led us to study what Hemant told us about the last 100 years of tech revolutions. And what we discovered changed everything we thought we knew about AI's future.
We are now a part of the Zerodha Media Network.
When we dug into history, we found that this exact pattern has happened twice before, with oil in 1901 and semiconductors in 1987. Each time, it has followed an identical three-phase cycle that no one saw coming until it was too late. Let's first start with looking at the oil supercycle. It started with the extractive phase in 1901. See, before Spindletop happened, oil was scarce in the US. Then boom! 100,000 barrels per day emerged from a single well. That was more than the entire world combined. Standard Oil dominated this extractive phase of oil. And by 1904, they controlled 91% of production and 85% of all sales. Standard Oil became so profitable that its founder, John D. Rockefeller, became the wealthiest American in history. Rockefeller built infrastructure, so refineries, pipelines, and the resource became cheap and abundant, like we said, that happened in the extractive phase. In 1920s, the distributive phase started. Now, once oil became cheap and available, companies like Ford used it to power cars at scale. See, Ford introduced the assembly line in 1913, and by the late 1920s, they had sold 15 million Model Ts, peaking at about 2 million cars per year. By the mid-1920s, Ford controlled 60% of the automobile market, so dominant that they barely needed to advertise. Now, oil companies saw automobiles as the first mass use case for oil. Then GM's Alfred Sloan changed the game. While Ford famously said customers could have any color so long as it is black, Sloan introduced planned obsolescence, campaigning for car owners to discard their perfectly functioning cars twice every year for newer and more stylish models built by GM. Over the next 2 decades, GM would go on to capture 40% of market share in the US, while Ford dropped from 60% market share to just about 20%. At peak, the world had around 500 car companies globally. That is what we mean when we say the distributive phase is won by salespeople. And finally, by 1960s, we entered oil's destructive phase in the supercycle. OPEC was formed to artificially control oil prices because the market was very saturated. US oil production peaked at 9.5 million barrels per day in 1970, then declined through the 1980s and the 90s. Of those 500 car companies that once existed, most died. Even though oil prices went up from 1990s through 2020s, investing in oil indices gave flat returns because the value had moved away from oil extraction towards software and semiconductors. This phenomenon gave birth to the CPU supercycle starting in the 1960s. See, companies like Fairchild, Intel, and AMD spent 30 years doing R&D to make CPUs cheap. In 1987, the global semiconductor market was worth 33 billion and grew to 51 billion by 1990. Intel released the Pentium series in 1993. From 1993 to 1996, the semiconductor market grew 30% per year during the Windows PC boom. And who won? It was chip makers like Intel, AMD, NEC, Toshiba, and Samsung. Once CPU cycles became cheap, software companies started to distribute this value, and so the distributive phase of CPU cycles started. Companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook built software on top of these cheap CPU cycles and took an objective to put a computer in every home and internet in every device. In this phase, software companies captured 10x more value than chip makers. This brings us to the destructive phase of the 2010s. By this time, every major software category had saturated. All were doing the same thing, competing on minor features, support, and discounts. Hemant calls this the Malthusian bloodbath. We know that the first golden age of software is over. Value had started moving from just software to AI, and we now have entered the AI supercycle. The early 2020s kickstarted AI's extractive phase. Companies like Nvidia, OpenAI, and Anthropic are spending billions making AI tokens and intelligence cheap and accessible. And the numbers tell the story. AI investments in 2024 crossed $250 billion. Nvidia went from 2 trillion to 3 trillion in market cap in just 96 days. And AI adoption is exploding with 78% of all orgs using AI. Now who's winning this phase? AI infrastructure companies like Nvidia and AMD because they are building infrastructure, and companies like OpenAI and Anthropic because they are building models. All of them are making intelligence cheap and abundant, very similar to the oil and semiconductor companies in the past. Starting now, we are entering the early distributive phase of the AI supercycle. Microsoft made over $10 billion in AI revenue in 2024, the fastest product ramp in their history. SoftBank and Masayoshi Son taking away their money from Nvidia and investing it in OpenAI. Google now ships 25% of its code using AI generation. Klarna is planning to cut its workforce by 50% using AI. Some layers of AI are reaching commoditization. Think about it. Think of how hard it is to tell one AI generated image from another. Also, many AI founding teams are actually leaving their companies. For example, OpenAI has lost most of its founding team. This is a classic sign of transition from an R&D focused innovation phase to a more distribution focused phase. This begs the question once again, who will win next in this AI supercycle? In simple words, AI apps. You'll see soon AI apps will be everywhere. There'll be vertical players like AI doctors, assistants, co-pilots. Companies that brand and distribute AI effectively will win, and not the model builders. This is exactly like how Intel did not capture software's value during the internet supercycle. Eventually, of course, AI too will reach saturation, and too many AI companies will do the same thing, commoditization, and we'll see a market bloodbath. Value will move to the next big innovation, and the cycle will repeat.